Hi, everybody. My name is Austin. This is Fantasy Baseball on Deck. If this is a returning viewer, number one, thank you so much for your time. And number two, I really look forward to this year coming up as always. And you mean a ton to me. So, again, thank you so much for the support. If this is your first time seeing this goofy face in this goofy way, talk about fantasy baseball, welcome for the first time, but also I'd like to announce that a blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then. This is the most valuable video that I share year long. So today, specifically this video, I'm going to share with you exactly how I evaluate batters, and as well, there's going to be a following video that where I evaluate hitters, and they're equally as valuable. But anyways, before I say anything else, I got three goals for us today throughout this video that you can ideally walk away with. And the goal is for you to essentially understand why I make decisions, understand how to kind of better differentiate and make decisions based on the data available for yourself, but also like be able to relate to me when I say things in the future. We can have more educated, thought-provoking conversations because we're on the same page. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to always agree with me. You very well could disagree with me, but like there's no arguments because you understand exactly where I'm coming from. And, I'm super transparent with exactly what I think. And I think that that's the most, one of the more valuable things that I provide, or kind of what I built this channel on, was the concept of like, I, just like you would go for fantasy baseball or try to find fantasy baseball analysis across these websites. And this has always been like my number one hobby, like favorite time of the year. And I would always walk away listening. I listened to a podcast that was an hour long, and I would always walk away thinking that like, I wish I had that hour back because everything was just so non-transparent. I don't necessarily think I learned anything. It's just like these people who have titles and who get paid to talk about baseball told me what they think, but I don't understand why they think the way they do. And that's the opposite here. My goal is, again, to teach you / share with you in a way that's using universal concepts that you can always understand where I'm coming from. So number one, value add point of the video, besides the conceptual, like understand where I'm coming from piece, is I'm going to teach you how to use my cheat sheet. If you already know what the cheat sheet is, that's great. If you don't, this is the very first thing that I ever did for YouTube. My whole point was I wanted to provide, again, an upfront value to everyone for free to sort of get buy-in to like understand where I'm coming from, to like be able to have a site and be able to talk about people. Like I share with you this cheat sheet that you can use throughout your draft, and I'll show you like how you use that in a very like expedited way. But essentially, it's the exact format and frame of what you'll see in your ESPN draft, in order, highlighted, color-coded, notes next to suggestions, draft advice, whatever, all in one document, so that you can basically pair it next to your draft while you're in the middle of it. And it'll help you along the way so that you're always making educated decisions based on like the forecast and like what you expect sort of to come up. And whatever, that probably didn't make a lot of sense, but I'll explain to you. I'll show you exactly how I use it. Number two, how to evaluate batters. Just like what I said, like being able to sort of forecast and focus in on the individual variables that are most important to figuring out who is the most valuable hitters within a plethora, a vast list of numbers and data and names and whatever that doesn't necessarily mean a ton to everyone. But like, how can we like sift through all of the gunk to really highlight the hidden gems per se? So as you can sort of like reason across all of baseball, to me, there's kind of like three types of players. And like in general, there's power hitters, so guys that can hit between 30 and 40 home runs, whatever, like not a ton of speed, but they're going to hit between the 3 and the 5 hole essentially in any lineup, and be really relied upon like to clean up and earn a lot of RBIs and different things. So power hitters. There's also hybrid hitters. The hybrid hitters a lot of times are between the 1 and the 3 spot. They're guys that are going to hit anywhere between 20 and 30 home runs, as well as 20 and 30 stolen bases. And these guys are kind of like the do it all toward the top of the lineup, but like how do you differentiate between a power hitter and a hybrid hitter kind of as we forecast and look forward to the season? Like what makes the most sense for you in your league? And that's kind of what I'm going to teach you, as well as number 3 type of hitter is kind of like the top of the order guy. Whether they succeed through like mass volume or mass speed, the volume and consistency aspect is really where they latch on and succeed. So like a power hitter would, for example, would be like a Yonder Alonso, not a Pete Alonso. Geez, Yonder Alonso's retired. Pete Alonso, Matt Olson would be good examples of power hitters. Hybrid hitters would be, again, towards the like top end of the spectrum. You'd have like your Julio Rodriguez, you would have your Trey Turners of the world, and then like the top of the order, either like speedy guys that are like earning extra points via stolen bases, or just like consistently like not single machines, but like just constantly at the top of the order, playing every single day, succeeding through volume of just being high average, solid contact hitters are very valuable. But like, how do we compare that against the power and hybrid guys? So like a guy like Freddie Freeman, Marcus Semien, those dudes that play every single day, aren't necessarily crushing the ball, aren't necessarily the fastest, but just always end up towards the top in regards to performance for the year. So how do we really determine like what makes sense for our roster? And this is what I'm going to run through. So, and then number 3, I think like, and that was like 2 parts A, B, and C essentially. Number 3, I kind of go over again, like highlight the importance of you understanding what your league rules are and how to build your roster in a way during your draft and set up your draft preferences in a way to better help you succeed. So when you're in it, you're always making a confident decision, even though the clock's going down. You're always thinking ahead and doing things for yourself. So if you play fantasy baseball with for ESPN, that was basically that is what this site does, like what this site is built for, or my channel. You would go to fantasy, you click on baseball, you go to the top tab, you click 2024 rankings. The number, like what you see here is just basically going to be the overall rank, player, team, eligible positions, and then like the auction values essentially for the top 300 players. And this is the exact order that you will see during your actual draft. So in accordance, I built a sheet that looks exactly like what you just saw on this other page, but the only difference is that I highlighted, color coded, and then added my like notes of like why I think this player is green, yellow, or red next to it, so that like you can sort of at least reason why I thought the way that I did. You don't have to read every single box. I doubt anyone has ever read every single box, but if you're kind of between 2 players, one's highlighted yellow, one's highlighted green, but you're kind of leaning towards yellow, I'm going to have a reason for like, hey, this player is blank, great for whatever reason, but like there's this but scenario afterwards. So to quickly go through what the color coding means, so just easy enough, like right at the very top, Juan Soto, a player that is green with no bold in the name and no scion, so just green across like Juan Soto looks, is a player that I consider to be a good choice for where they're at in the draft. So I think that Juan Soto is effectively and accurately rated as at number 2. I'm not like above and beyond like excited, but like if you wanted Juan Soto with your number 2 overall pick, I'd have no qualms with that. I'm not going to argue with you whatsoever, or I wouldn't argue with you. I'd be happy to have him really at any point in the first round. So then the other option is a player like find one. Okay, so like Zach Gallen is green, but his name is bolded. This means that I think that this is a player that's like almost can't miss, kind of like not over the moon about, but like I think is an extremely good value for where they're at, and you should be extremely confident about drafting that player where they're at. And then here's like the highest creme de la creme is like a Bobby Witt Jr. at number 18 has a bolded name and scion. And I think that across this entire top 300 players that have like another 50 added on to the end, there are only like 15 Scion players. So essentially, like these are the guys that like I have ultra confidence in to be differentiators at their positions. To me, can't miss super special talents that will absolutely produce for you, and then are like, whether they're ranked accordingly, whether they're underrated, whatever, are just guys that I like can't really afford to walk away or not walk away with, kind of thing. So that's for the players that are like that are thumbed up green. Yellow, like a Rafael Devers. In this situation, I've had Rafael Devers multiple times throughout the years. He does nothing but produce. He's awesome. But for this situation at number 22, I just think that there are more third basemen later in the draft that are similarly similarly talented and will produce similarly. So like, because I think third base is deeper, I'm not taking a third baseman like super early. So he's highlighted yellow, though I think that he's going to be, let's say, a top 5 third baseman. I just think that the rest of that top 5 can be found later in the draft. So I highlight him yellow. I don't think he's not going to produce. I just would rather have different positions at this point in the draft, if that makes sense. And then a red is a player that I think is ranked too highly, or I would maybe appreciate having, but is just far too just not at that point in the draft, right? So a player like Alex Bregman mostly benefits, like, so it's also a kind of a player type, right? So Alex Bregman in some fantasy leagues is super duper valuable because he doesn't strike out. Like, he doesn't incur any negative points towards him. But if you're in a league that doesn't have penalties for strikeouts, then like Alex Bregman is not even going to be close to as valuable as many other players, many other people at his position. Maybe like an Austin Riley. It's later in the draft. Austin Riley strikes out a lot, but like when it comes to total bases and overall individual production, Austin Riley is going to blow past Alex Bregman. So that's why he's highlighted red. Or like a Garrett Cole just recently, he got put like on the IL, essentially like shut down for 1 to 2 months. To me, I looked through that and I made a video earlier tonight about Garrett Cole and like why the Yankees are doing this. I think that Garrett Cole, there's a high chance that he's out for the rest of the season at the number 40 spot, even though Garrett Cole, traditionally is the best pitcher in fantasy baseball. He's not worth a risk within the top 40 because of how much value is within the top 40. So that's kind of how I go about ranking them. And the way that it looks, or the way it would look if you were to use the tool, is essentially if you only had one screen. Obviously, if you had dual monitors, if you have 2 monitors, which is what I have, or 3 monitors, whatever, you'd have one of each on each side. But if you just had a laptop, then essentially you'd have the ESPN draft room open on one side and then my tool open on the left. And you could essentially go through and highlight. So if you saw Bobby Witt Jr. at 18, you saw Bobby Witt Jr. here at 18, you highlight, go back and forth, highlight like Q according to what's green and what's not. And obviously, like, if there are players, if you love Rafael Devers and you like are from Boston, Massachusetts, whatever, and you like have to walk away with him, obviously, like, I want you guys to walk away with players that you like. That's the whole point of like, and the fun of fantasy baseball is like engaging with the teams that you love. So like, for example, like if you're going down the list and you see Devers here, feel free to highlight him and cue him if you love him. And if you like had some problem with you think that Framber Valdez is ugly, then like you wouldn't cue Framber Valdez or things. You sort of pick and choose, but these are my this is my way to success. And this is like, again, every note is very purposeful on the right here. It explains why I think the way that I think, and hopefully that's helpful. On the right side, you'll see this graph, and essentially it will show you kind of like how many players per 20 that I like find valuable, or like that I have highlighted green, so that you can sort of forecast like when to get what. So for example, I've kind of used that, like, there's only in the top 40 players, there's only 3 second basemen that I think are worth anything. And then you have to wait all the way again until 80 through 100, and then 200 through 220. And that's pretty much it for that whole position. So across the top 300 players, there's only 7 second basemen that I like overall in general. So that's kind of explaining like how I go about like at least forecasting and illustrating where people are, whatever. And then I have suggestions kind of like by round. If you have a 10-team league, this is kind of what I would do in the order of like who is available if they're available. So done speaking about the cheat sheet, but the value of the cheat sheet is that, like, if I didn't properly explain how or what I thought through the notes, then you can easily go over to the the batter evaluation and log in. And this is what we're going to start talking about. So I have highlighted, I have the things that I have highlighted in blue up here are essentially dependent values. Things that are like not super focused, not super important to focus on, but like they're bonus points and they're worth points to you. So I have them highlighted just so you can sort of like pick out and find like how many RBIs runs they had this past year. It kind of gives you an idea of where they're hitting in the batting lineup, whatever. But what's most important to me is to focus on the independent values. And the independent values to me are home runs, stolen bases, batting average, and then total bases. And then in addition to total bases like per hit, and then overall total bases plus stolen bases together. So why do I think this? A home runs are just like one of the more valuable independent stats because you are walking up to the plate and generating a run on your own, no help whatsoever. Home runs are a great like measure and kind of baseline for the expectation of power that we need to facilitate a solid lineup or whatever. Next is stolen bases. So like if you get on first base, to me, it's super valuable to have the ability to get from first base to second base. Not only are you earning a point there, but you individually put yourself into a better position to score that bonus run with the hitters behind you. So a player like Kyle Tucker, just for example, because he's there, hybrid hitter, we're going to figure out like what is the difference between a player like Kyle Tucker, who has 29 home runs and 30 stolen bases, compared to a player like Juan Soto, who has 35 home runs but like less stolen bases. Like what's the difference between those two guys in regards to kind of like forecasting success throughout the year. And then I mentioned average before. These should all be white. Every now and then you'll run into a red, and if it's highlighted red, that means that it's below the 240 mark. So we want hitters that are, no matter what type of hitter they're going to hit above 240. 240 for me is just kind of like the mandatory watermark that I expect. Because if you're not hitting above 240, you're not earning enough volume for your power numbers to even play in, or your speed numbers to even play in, because you're not on base enough to make a difference, right? Total bases. Total bases are the most important stat to me in regards to tracking individual production from a volume perspective. So total bases, you have an opportunity to earn between 1 and 4 total bases per at bat if you get a hit. So if I get a hit and it's a single, that's 1 total base. If I get a hit, it's double, 2 total bases, triple, 3 total bases, home run, 4 total bases, right? So total bases are a measure of the individual hitting output of a batter, taking out runs, taking out RBIs. If the bases are loaded, if the bases are always empty, this is a way that we really grab players that play for the Royals that don't score a lot of points or don't score a lot of runs as a team, and compare a player like Bobby Witt Jr. to a player like Ozzie Albies hitting in the middle of the best offense in baseball, being the Atlanta Braves, and be able to compare them. Like, what are their total base outputs? from a volume perspective. From a quality perspective, we use total bases per hit. Total bases per hit essentially is measuring and averaging, like however many total bases you earn divided by the hits that you have. So like how often are you hitting a ball for extra bases? So like, for example, it's pretty easy to see that like when Pete Alonso gets a hit, he's averaging 2.33 total bases per hit. Same thing, Aaron Judge, 2.30 total bases per hit. We want players, if anything close to 2 bases per hit is incredible. And assuming that if they match, as long as they have above the 240, this is kind of important. As long as they have above the 240 average, then they're ownable. So like up here, Joey Gallo leads all of Major League Baseball in total bases per hit, and that's super valuable to understand. But because he doesn't have a batting average that's high enough to matter, like Joey Gallo is not ownable. He's not a top 50 player overall, right? So like because he's kicking butt every time that he's actually making contact, like it doesn't mean anything because he's not getting on base enough via his average to matter. So that's a way of like knocking out or eliminating a player from someone that we're interested in. I am super interested in Pete Alonso. He's a career 270, 260 hitter. Last year was the first time he ever hit 216. He's kind of the anomaly. I'm going after him in every draft if I need a first baseman at that point and be confident with that. But besides that, all of the other below 240 hitters, not interested in. So we talked about total bases and the value of volume across the year. That again gives us an opportunity to figure out like, who is individually productive, not just like earning a bunch of runs and RBIs because the team overall is super talented. Total bases per hit, how many total bases are you individually earning per hit to sort of separate you from the others? And then the all-encompassing total bases plus stolen bases. So the overall volume value as from a hitting and base running perspective, combining these things, how valuable are you? And so like this gives us the ability to compare someone who like Julio Rodriguez for Seattle, who has every opportunity to hit 30 home runs and earn 30 plus stolen bases, compared to a player that doesn't steal any bases but hits a ton of home runs like Matt Olson with 54 home runs. How do we compare those guys because they're so different, right? So those are the main individual independent stats that I want to focus on. Now, going into the dependent stats of what's not important. Again, like I mentioned before, we're not focused on runs. We're not focused on RBIs. We're not focused on walks. And if you're a fan of Moneyball, I think I'm a fan of Moneyball too. But the part that I disagree with the most in Moneyball, other than them not mentioning that they had like a Hall of Fame pitching rotation, is that a guy getting a hit and a single to first base and a guy getting a walk to first base is very, very different. Because if you get a walk, there's no opportunity for RBIs unless the bases are loaded. If you get a single, there's a player on first base. They truly have an opportunity to advance an entire extra base to third, as well as if you have a player on second, like you have an opportunity to score home. And then if you had a player obviously on third, a single would score them every time no matter what. So a walk is not looked at as valuable as a single. Do not mix those up. The opportunity for success via a walk is far less than getting hit. So we're not going to focus on walks. I put walks in the dependent category. If they get walked, it's sort of a bonus, but it's a consolation prize, right? So that's the difference between independent stats and dependent stats. Again, independent stats that we're always focused on: home runs, stolen bases, like batting average, and total bases. Dependent stats that we're not worried about, but every website wants to really hone in and focus on, are runs, RBIs, and walks. Not worried about those. So let's talk about independent statistics, like with with players in particular. So I'm going to compare two players that are similarly ranked at the same position, but are very different playing styles. And basically, it's like independent volume versus independent quality per hit. So to make this easier, I'm going to filter by projected 550 at bats. So 550 at bats. Basically, and what I didn't explain before is the fantasy points for the whole season across like a standard ESPN league is here. To the right of that is projecting every player, no matter how many games they actually played last year. If every player had 550 at bats only, what would their production be? And that's a tool for essentially comparing players that play 160 games compared to a player like Aaron Judge, who usually misses between 80 and 40 games or whatever, to really compare to see like if this injured player all of a sudden was able to play a whole season, what could we expect from them, or how much more valuable are they again per at bat? The next over here obviously is like if you play in a league that is like pretty standardized, but you took away the penalty for strikeouts, then this is your projection per 550 at bats without strikeouts counting against your player, which dramatically improves and decreases some players depending on kind of their playing style. So what I want to do is basically show you exactly how I would go about comparing two players that are ranked the same but have almost polar opposite playing styles. And that's going to be Aaron Judge and Corbin Carroll. If I have my cheat sheet, I go here and I had Aaron Judge ranked. What did I do with them? Sorry, guys. Aaron Judge. Where do you go? Okay. Aaron Judge is number 17. Corbin Carroll is number 14. I had Aaron Judge bolded before, but like because of the injury history and like that early in the draft, this is gonna, again, this lesson specifically is gonna sort of like teach you like, all right, how many at bats does Aaron Judge have to get to sort of surpass Corbin Carroll? The difference between Corbin Carroll and Aaron Judge, a ton of home runs versus a good amount of home runs and all of the stolen bases. So let's look into it. One's ranked 14th. One's ranked 17th. How do we make a more educated decision? So again, going to batter evaluation, I'm going to compare these two people. Aaron, we'll start off with Corbin Carroll just because he's higher ranked according to the pre-ranking. So Corbin Carroll he averages 1.78 total bases per hit. That's pretty good for a leadoff hitter. His productivity per 550 at bats. These two columns here are showing that he's going to earn between around 25 home runs and plus 50 stolen bases, compared to Aaron Judge, who's earning almost a 2.3 total bases per hit. That's crazy, awesome, good, whatever. But like he's going to earn 55 home runs, which is also incredible. That's like the projection per 550 at bats, but only steal 4 bases compared to 52 bases. So how do we compare, these two producers? So again, what I did, because they didn't play the same amount of games per year, what you do is you take their production, you like their points, divide it by the at bats, and essentially get their production per 550 at bats, and it shows that Aaron Judge would score 510 points compared to Corbin Carroll scoring 452 points across a season if they were limited and maxed out at the same amount of at bats. In a real life situation, Corbin Carroll, being young, again, knock on wood, no injury history, is always going to have more at bats than Aaron Judge, but this is a way that we can sort of project, again, a healthy season for a player who doesn't traditionally know what a healthy season or experience a healthy season. So what we would do now is essentially go and like figure out what Corbin Carroll scored. So across 155 games, Corbin Carroll scored 464 points. And these are the real, like this is the real total. 464 points, which means you earn 2.99 points per game. And then we're going to do like essentially like a cost analysis or a break-even analysis to figure out, okay, Aaron Judge only scored 340 points across 106 games. So 3.21 points per game compared to 2.99 points a game. The break-even analysis is that Aaron Judge needs to play 144 games out of the 162 to surpass Corbin Carroll if Corbin Carroll is essentially to play all 162 games. So like that's the sort of the math problem that you're going to do in your head and like the reasoning with yourself versus like, again, Corbin Carroll, who has a lower ceiling because as we just figured out, like per 550 at bats, Aaron Judge is going to outscore Corbin Carroll by almost 60 points, but we understand that Corbin Carroll is going to have more at bats, whatever. Aaron Judge needs to play at least 144 games to have the same output or more, right? So like you understand that there's more leeway with a player like Aaron Judge, but he's more likely to get injured, as we understand. So knowing that Aaron Judge has only played 150 games in general twice in his entire career, to me, and kind of like how I have these, ranked on my sheet, like I have Corbin Carroll bolded, especially for leagues that give you bonuses for stolen bases. I'm more comfortable taking Corbin Carroll, honestly, than I am Aaron Judge. I know that when Aaron Judge starts out the year, he has an abdominal issue already to start the season, but I know that Aaron Judge is going to break out ahead in the beginning of the year, but I know that Corbin Carroll is going to be dependent, and I don't have to worry about his health. I know that he's always going to be relevant on the base paths, creating points through volume. And for me, in regards to the health aspect, I think he's more of a safe pick, even though if they get the same amount of at-bats, Aaron Judge is going to be absolutely incredible. So, and then like, again, obviously, if there's no penalties for strikeouts in your league, you can see that Aaron Judge is the most valuable hitter per at-bat in all of fantasy baseball if he's not getting penalized for his strikeouts. So that's kind of how I use the sheet and figure out and kind of compare and contrast across, again, two players that are very elite at their individual things. So Aaron Judge being an elite power hitter and Corbin Carroll being an elite hybrid sort of player that's going to get almost 30 home runs, 50 plus stolen bases. But again, that's how I differentiate and kind of figure out, like, between the two players, what's the safer route. Next, I'm going to talk about the market analysis between an elite power hitter that's missing one of the necessary tools. So like it's going to be Kyle Schwarber, who's missing the average aspect. How do I compare a elite power hitter who's not getting enough volume compared to a low power hitter with like elite speed? So these are two types of players that are, again, elite or like far above their peers in one category, but like aren't necessarily thriving in any other one, and kind of how that plays into it. So I want to filter by total bases and stolen bases as a result of individual production, right? So going down the way, I'm comparing CJ Abrams, who only had 18 home runs, but 47 stolen bases, hits just above the acceptable amount, 245 average. He really came into his own towards the end of the year. 268 total bases per hit isn't spectacular, but if we look at his total bases and stolen bases put together, he's individually more productive than Kyle Schwarber by 2 total bases across the season. They both hit leadoff, but very, very opposite playing styles, right? So like Kyle Schwarber had 29 more home runs than CJ Abrams, 47 overall. Kyle Schwarber with 2.41 total bases per hit is first in all of Major League Baseball with as many at-bats, like minimum at-bats that he incurred. But he also strikes out 215 times, which is the worst in Major League Baseball. and carries a 197 average, far below the Mendoza line, which is also the worst in baseball. So you have this player who has the most total bases per hit, but isn't incurring enough volume through his average, is also like being inhibited by his strikeouts. But like anytime he essentially like hits the ball, gets the ball in play, he's crushing it. So how do you like, again, figure out the difference between these two guys? And this is kind of the way that we sort of like figure out, okay, individually, I can see very clearly that CJ Abrams is more individually productive than Kyle Schwarber. But also, if we look at the points, Kyle Schwarber scored 60 more points than CJ Abrams, but this is assuming that Kyle Schwarber is also going to maintain that leadoff spot or like a primetime spot in the batting order after, not succeeding this past year in regards to an average perspective. But also, it sort of shows me that he's so elite in the power category, but he has no room for error. The second, and he's an average, career average is 220. So Kyle Schwarber with a 220 average and a high strikeout rate essentially makes him super duper volatile, because the second that his power starts to dip, he's going to fall off the face of the earth because he doesn't get enough volume to matter, sort of thing. So CJ Abrams, even though he's only getting 18 home runs, he's stealing a ton of bases. He's not going to just get slower from age 23 to age 24 season. He's going to continue to hit at the top of the lineup of the Nationals. And, this point difference, even though it's huge, 60 points compared between CJ Abrams and Kyle Schwarber, that's really only happening because of the elite power aspect. The second that his home runs dip below 40 into the 30s, he's falling down the list super duper far. So this is, again, a way of sort of showing individual productivity across two very different offenses, being Philadelphia being a top 10 offense at number 8 and Washington being a bottom third offense at number 21. Both hit in the same spot of the lineup, both leadoff hitters, exact opposite player styles, but who was more individually productive? It was CJ Abrams, even though the overall fantasy points didn't follow that exact same narrative. You can sort of predict like what's more sustainable and who's more sustainable, and that's the point of this exercise. So the next one we're going to go to is just a very quick, kind of highlighting individual productivity and the importance of picking players and not teams. So because even though these players didn't score as many as some of their comrades, I'm always, and you guys can fight me on this, like the way that I'm always confident and I always win fantasy baseball is because I'm picking players that are non-dependent, independently producing offense on their own. They do not have to rely on any of their teammates. They could be playing for the Braves, or they could be playing for the Oakland Athletics. To me, it doesn't matter. I want a player who's individually productive, and if like his teammates help him out, that's a bonus. But like I'm not relying on that sort of thing. So it's just a highlight of seeing like Bobby Witt Jr. and Julio Rodriguez, both a part of like not super awesome offenses I don't expect to be overly productive this year. But like if you're going to talk about individual productivity, Bobby Witt Jr. was number 4, Julio Rodriguez number 5, and then even like going down to like Luis Robert Jr., who is like ranked 82nd or something like that, 86 or something like that in our fantasy baseball pre-rankings. Like super confident in 83 overall Luis Robert Jr., because even with 140 games played this past season, he was, again, the 15th most productive individual batter in baseball. And these are the things that I'm really honed in and focused on. So again, like Rafael Devers, offense not very good, but like always going to finish in the top 25 in individual productivity. So pick players, not teams. Don't care about where they're from, just matters that they're hitting basically within the top 4 batting lineup spots and individually producing, not relying on others. That's the only notes I have for the blue and white players. And then the next part is kind of like going through the importance of understanding your league rules and really building a roster to meet your league rules. So just by just for example, so like I'm going to filter like the productivity per 550 at bats without any penalties in strikeouts or penalties for strikeouts. And you can see what this does to players. So if it was a player who was incurring strikeouts per 50 or whatever they scored in 2023, Kyle Schwarber doubles in value. So he goes from 30th to 14th. So like it says 15, but 14th because these title columns. So Kyle Schwarber without penalties for strikeouts turns into the 14th most productive batter. Alex Bregman, someone who mostly benefits the opposite direction. He just doesn't strike out. He's not overly productive, but just doesn't strike out. Goes from 11th most valuable down to 64th down here. And then like a player like similarly like Luis Arraez, who has almost no power, never strikes out, is a singles machine, goes from 37th all the way down to 188th. Is that correct? 188th. Yeah. 188th. So you can see like the difference in your league. But the thing is that your what you'll see on your draft day will not change. Like you'll see projections that'll meet your team's or like your league's like scoring, but the overall rank won't change. So you'll know and say to yourself that like Stephen Kwan in the top 100 is not worth it if you have strikeout, like penalties for strikeouts, because his whole thing is like not striking out and running super hard, being the high effort guy sort of thing, but he's not efficient, right? So that's kind of the note for that. And then the next part that I wanted to hone in on was we talked about the power hitters, we talked about the hybrid hitters, we talked about the volume guys, and the volume guys at the top of the lineup that just play every single day. We didn't really hone in on completely, but these are the guys that just, again, they play every single day and they mostly succeed through just being healthy all the time. And it's tough to sort of like assign a value to that because they're not overly impressive at anything. They're just kind of like really good at everything. So going over to, again, the batter evaluations and just simply clicking on total bases plus stolen bases for the entire year overall, the black and white players. So Marcus Semien is ranked 9th in complete volume, independent volume, but he's 24th ranked on ESPN. So like, I would consider him a pretty good bargain, right? Because you're getting 9th in productivity, but 24th overall in the draft. Next, Nick Castellanos down here at he's 18th. What I saw that so Nick Castellanos is 18th in productivity from just a total bases plus stolen bases perspective, but like just didn't luck out into a lot of runs and RBIs given his spot in the batting order. So he's 18th in productivity, individual productivity, but he's ranked 135th in your draft. Same thing with like Lane Thomas, who bats at the top of the order in the 2 spot for Washington. Lane Thomas, 17th overall in individual productivity, but he's ranked 160th in your draft order. So that's just an example, again, of kind of highlighting players who are just constantly putting the ball in play, hitting towards the top of the lineup, and are pretty good values, or at least how to uncover pretty good values for those players that, again, like aren't super strong, aren't super fast, but are just always relevant and always, doing the right things kind of thing. So the draft tool is active. Again, I'll have all the links in the comments. Thank you so much for following along. I hope this was valuable. If you have any questions, please put them down in the link. I'm going to take away all these color codings just to avoid people getting confused in the future. But again, let me know what you think. And I really look forward to the next video, which will be the pitching evaluation. So thank you again for your time, and talk to you soon. Bye.